There's no like Bible bashing.
Hydrated.
Yeah. So this coming Sunday, you are going to stand right there.
Yeah.
And preach about, well, okay, my Bible says it's the resurrection.
Yes.
So we're in 1 Corinthians 15 this coming Sunday. We got a whole lot from 15 where there's a lot going on. And then the little end bit where it's this whole, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, the dead will be raised, imperishable, will be changed. This death, where is your victory? Death, where is your sting? So we got a lot of death and resurrection.
We're going to add verse 58. We know the narrative lectionary ends at 57, but if you listen to the commentary, they're saying to add 58, and I think it is beautiful and key to our understanding of this.
Therefore, my beloved, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Lord, because you know that in the Lord your labor is not in vain.
Yes.
All right. Well, you had that memorized.
Yes, yes. Because they also suggested it could be a great benediction. So I was thinking if it were, I needed to memorize it. Yeah.
You're learning all the tricks here today.
All the tricks.
Okay, so I'll be honest. I'm glad I'm not preaching this one.
Yeah.
But you are. So what's going on?
It's not a super easy text. I mean, this is Paul, like, being, in a way convoluted, and you're like, what? So I will give this bit of advice. Whenever I have a text that feels like I don't really know what's going on, I always read the Eugene Peterson Message translation, because he just simplifies things, and often I can find in his translation a word or a phrase that helps me find my way into the NRSV or NIV, whatever translation you're using. So that's
don't use the NIV. More on that later. But the NRSV is a more word-for-word translation,
yes,
taking word to put it into, in this case, English, whereas Eugene Peterson and others like it is more idea for idea.
Yes.
So it can help you get kind of a better handle on what's going on.
Right. It
The
can give
good
you a
is,
door in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The two together are a nice pair.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So it is a text that's talking about like dogma and belief.
Yeah.
And I think I'm calling the sermon Credo, I believe, because this is really at the heart of what Paul is talking about, what we believe. And resurrection is at the center of what we believe. And he's basically saying, if we don't believe it, then kind of like, what are we doing here? Why are we even gathering? And I think at the end of the day, that's true for us as well. The challenge, of course, is going to come in making that real for 2024, for very smart, very educated, even people who maybe go to church because it's a nice thing to do, but, we don't really, our lives don't depend on believing in the resurrection. So maybe you guys have ideas, but how to make 21st century people center and understand the centrality of the resurrection in the way that Paul did. Now, again, this is a person who thought Jesus is coming back tomorrow, so that energy might have been a bit easier to generate. And here we've been languishing all these years.
Yeah, we're like, you're late.
You're late, Jesus. So how to make that real for folks who are getting on the subway and working two jobs and worried about what's happening in world events and upcoming presidential elections, where it feels like we have so much control and at the same time have so little control. And how does believing in the resurrection matter for my life today?
Yeah, because that's where this just feels like Paul is seeming to set out like a first draft of the fundamentals.
Yes.
And then I think of, our late friend who we got the chance to meet years ago, Marcus Borg, who would probably have a few thoughts on this. Because, Dr. Borg did not believe in a bodily resurrection. And
yeah, well,
he might not have said it that straightforward.
Well, I think he said something like, if you had a video camera at the and they rolled away the stone, could you have captured a body walking out? And he was like, probably not. Yeah. So yeah, I think that what you're saying is true.
Yeah, how then does someone who says I'm a Christian, but I have some reservations about particularities, this seems to be like, I'm not speaking autobiographically, am I?
No. I mean, unless we know you. But I think you're absolutely right, though. How does this resurrection story, kind of like the virgin birth, matter for my life today? And these were ideas that were, like you said, foundational and fundamental to belief in the time when they were written. So how do we make sense of them now, I think is the is the whole gist
Yeah.
of this reading. And it's tough because I imagine there are people who believe it just because that's what they've been taught or that's the tradition, or who haven't even really given it a
Yeah.
whole lot of thought. I don't know if I asked my teenager. I can probably guarantee that she's not given it a lot of thought.
One of my favorite little details. So I'm preparing for Open Bible Study. Join us 9:30 on Zoom.
Yeah.
Which I was trying to find tiny little things, so I did some work in advance for this
Oh, thank
conversation.
you.
So there's this verse 8 in here where Paul is saying, "Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me." So he's talking about himself. And he's listing how Jesus appeared to all these, everyone and all these things and all this, basically proof texting the resurrection because look, Jesus showed up. And so people look at that word as one untimely born, and some say like, oh, did he just get born too late to be one of the 12 disciples? That's not what it is. This is a Greek word that is typically, it's the only time it's used in the Bible is here, but outside it refers to like an abnormal birth or like a premature birth. So the thought is that Paul could have been someone who was born premature, and the thought was he wasn't going to make it, but he did. So he at his birth he experienced resurrection.
Oh, look at that. That's
And-
gorgeous.
yeah.
And there's a link, too, that he had some sort of deformity in his body, right?
Whether he couldn't write as his
Right.
handwriting or just
was
some
small
yeah.
yeah.
But I
Okay.
love the thought of Paul ranting about the resurrection, and in his own body he had already experienced resurrection. And to me that shifts what we're talking about, because it's not just this like, do I have to assent to a
Otherworldly.
Yeah, it's like, how is
Yes.
resurrection a thing that is still encountered and experienced?
in the world and in my life.
Yeah.
Oh, that is really good. Because I think that if we're old enough, and we don't have to be that old, we probably can point to a time
Yeah.
when there's been some sort of resurrection-like something
Yep.
in our life.
Yeah.
Even for probably people 12 and over may have experienced something like that. That's a really great way in, because we've got to make this resurrection story real for people right now. And I think there's a way in which we're so far removed from what Paul is describing. We've got to bring it into the modern time.
Yeah, otherwise if it just becomes a litmus test of
Belief.
are you a Christian, yes or no, like that becomes too like just polarizing and
Right.
misses the
Right.
point.
Yeah, it's flat. It's two-dimensional, and it is the Bible. But there are, I think, like Jesus in his time, we've got to find the way to tell these stories that bring them to life. I don't know why I'm thinking of like rehydration, those little things
Oh, yeah,
that
yeah,
kids would
yeah,
have,
where
they put in the water
And
and they kind of blow up. Yeah, we need to be able to do that with the text, because I think it
Yeah.
does seem dry and flat and dehydrated for young people and even for old people, especially this one, because it's so dense and you're like, what is he saying? I
Yeah.
don't quite understand.
Well, and this is week 3 of 4 in Corinthians, so we
Yeah.
got a lot of the Corinthian conflict. They were not a church where everything just went well. I think you've mentioned it in past sermons where
Right.
they were this, cosmopolitan, diverse city, and the minute you bring a bunch of people with differences together, you're
Yeah.
bound to have just a bit of like ruffled feathers from somebody. Which sounds a lot like church, by the way. If your church has everyone who looks and thinks just like you, I mean,
Probably there are ruffled feathers as well, but I
Yeah.
think in a church like Riverside, and definitely in this church in Corinth, different socioeconomic backgrounds, some wealthy, some not, and everything in between, you're definitely going to step on some toes.
Yeah.
And so if we can figure ourselves out in that context, it's a real achievement. But I will say, the figuring out is by the grace of God,
Yeah.
not because we're so good and holy, because clearly we are not. The other thing I would highlight from this community is that they should make you expect conflict. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, there will be some conflict because we have
maybe just where 2 are gathered. That's all.
Yes, yeah.
I conflict with myself sometimes, so we're one.
Where one is gathered, there's conflict as well. But we've got different pains and hurts. We've got different ideas about what would fix the world and fix ourselves and fix our church, and we're going to bump into each other.
Yeah.
But I think the beauty of the Corinthian church is how they stick together and how they try to move forward. And I think there's something about the striving where grace shows up. It helps us to
Yeah.
not hurt each other.
Well, therefore, my beloved, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Lord, because you know that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. It's It's a good add-on.
Amen. It's a beautiful
They should
add-on.
definitely include that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. That's this Sunday. Join us for worship. Special music starts at 10:30. The service kind of really gets rolling closer to 11, but you want to get there early. It's great. 9:30 a.m. Bible study in the room and on Zoom. After worship, we do a virtual coffee hour. You can talk more with Reverend Thorne and myself about the sermon.
Yeah.
Basically, we just make it a day and talk about the Bible a lot.
It's a great day. Who doesn't want to talk about the Bible a lot? It's great.
Especially the way we talk about the
I
Bible.
know,
It's
I know.
refreshing. There's no Bible bashing.
Hydrated.
Yeah. All right, we'll see you Sunday.